Okay, this is as good a time as any to have a chat about fishing gear for red-eye bass. So red-eye bass are definitely the ultimate fish to use the KISS principle. Keep it simple, stupid. Red-eye bass are not among the great thinkers of our time. They live in streams that often have few resources, and they're always hungry. They're not fished for all that often, so they're not very lure shy, and therefore you don't have to get all crazy with 47 colors and all these different kinds of lures, which is nice. This is the throwback to the days when fishing was a lot simpler. So let's start with the bag. So I use a fanny pack. I know a lot of people tend to like to use the some kind of a shoulder bag. Obviously that's fine. I've used the fanny pack literally since the days that I fished the New River when I was in undergraduate at Virginia Tech. That has been an alarmingly long time ago, 35 years. So old tricks die hard. I still like a fanny pack. Of course the shoulder bag does stay above the water a little more often than this does. This is a standard 3-pocket by L.L. Bean, as you see. I don't even think this is made anymore, but if you find a really good one with a good zipper construction and all, they'll last you forever. In all my 35 years of fishing, I've had about 2, maybe 3 of these, and this one I've had for at least 10 years. So these things are workhorses. In the front pocket here, this is where I have things I never really use very much when I'm red-eye bass fishing. Obviously a pair of pliers, measuring tape. I don't know if you all have done this before or not, but I find going to Walmart and buying a simple dressmaker's tape for about $1.35 and cut off some of it, because unless you're consistently catching bass a lot bigger than I am, you don't really need 8 foot of measuring tape. I like to measure fish. Now again, I don't do this very often when I'm red-eye bass fishing. This is a setup I use no matter where I fish. The front pocket is set up about the same. Pair of line scissors. I think these are from Rapala. And if I'm in a place where I'm weighing fish, that's where my scale goes. Sometimes I have big hooks down in that pocket, but not today, obviously, because I'm red-eye bass fishing. So let me go and pull out this. So here is the sum total of all the baits that I bring when I'm red-eye bass fishing or stream fishing for the most part. And to be completely honest, 95% of these things do not hit the water, and some of them haven't been wet in a decade. I can't help it. I just bring them because of force of habit. So we take a look at what we got here. You have your standard assortment of some smaller jerk baits. That's an old Husky jerk, so it's a suspender. Not sure why you would ever need that in a stream, but I have it anyway. This is a what used to be a Lose, I think is now just a Bass Pro Shops model, small golden color. I prefer to use gold in a lot of streams. The main large forage in these streams is actually suckers. There's not shad. There are shiners, of course, but suckers tend to have a gold cast, so I like to throw something with a little bit of gold in it. Some more smaller jerk baits right here. The usual assortment of Rapalas, none of which I ever throw for the most part. I will say every once in a while I've had trips saved by having a jerk bait when they're in a really neutral mood. Obviously small crayfish crankbaits. Here on the right you have your ones that I'm sure everyone's familiar with, the Rebel Crawdad ones, the smallest one. I think these are the smallest versions anyway. And the neat thing about them is they work on everything. Sunfish, shadow bass, rock bass, whatever, fall fish up north, whatever's swimming in your stream along with the bass will eat that lure. I don't know, they just like the action or whatever. I find problems with them sometimes when them flipping around in the water, or they're getting hooked up with each other. If you can get a bite on one of these more traditional shaped crankbaits, boy, you can really put it to them, because these things dive, they bounce off rocks, they almost never catch the line or anything like that. And I have had some fantabulous days fishing with them. See, I have a couple bigger crankbaits in here. I've never used those. If I was going to go out on a larger river to fish for red eyes, like say the Tallapoosa, those red crankbaits there have absolutely been murder on them before. Something else that I don't use, but a lot of people do, is simple inline spinners. I have them, so I always have a couple with me in case they turn out to be the ticket. But there's some people that's all they throw for red-eye bass. And that little tiny baby crayfish colored rattle trap has never hit water for red-eye bass. Have caught smallmouth bass on it before. So that's the one side right there. So we flip this thing over. Here we have the more spinnerbait, buzzbait kinds of things. A little bit of topwater. I have thrown these two for red-eye bass before and caught them on both of them. That little teeny torpedo, I'm not even sure if they still make them, but that has definitely worked. The tiny, of course, is a staple from a long time ago, starting with smallmouth bass angling for years, decades and decades. This used to be one of the favorite lures of John Herrick up in northern Minnesota, who was an absolute famous smallmouth bass guide and angler up there in the Ely area of Minnesota, Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. They certainly work down here. My favorite lure to throw for these things is these mini spinner baits. You can buy them at Walmart or something like that. They sell them for crappie and such. I have a friend who actually makes these things by hand for giant sunfish in southeast Georgia. I'll put a link up for his page in this video. His stuff is fantastic. These things, when they're working, nothing will beat them. And unlike a beetle spin and just like a spinnerbait, these things are mostly weedless. You can bounce them off rocks, you can bounce them off of wood, and they will occasionally hang up, but nothing like a beetle spin. Speaking of the beetle spin, of course, they work. I have them in a couple varieties. There's times where I've absolutely murdered both shoal bass and red-eye bass with them. I do have a very small 1/8 ounce buzzbait. I don't know that I've ever thrown that for red-eye bass. I have thrown it from time to time for shoal bass. It obviously works. And these really small chatterbaits. I wouldn't throw these for shoal bass for the most part unless I was fishing for them in a smaller stream. But these things do catch red-eye bass, and sometimes they really do work well. That tends to be what I have in that box. Which brings us to the middle pocket, and what the heck is in here? That is my soft plastics. So let me start going back to this. Let me start with the hook and the weight. So the hook is a size 1 owner worm hook. They are not easy to find. You usually have to order them, and but they work. They're small enough to hold this worm and still penetrate the fish. And in that weight there is a 1/32 ounce weight. Again, I don't think you can find these in stores, but you can get it at Bass Pro Shops online. This little combination here is just absolutely deadly. So what is that worm that I'm using? Well, it's actually a yum dinger, which is probably one of the most common river worms used, right? But this one, my friends, this one is a yum 3 dinger. This is a 3-inch yum dinger. I found these for the first time in my life at a Dick's Sporting Goods up in New Jersey when I was up there on vacation, just in a bin, and they were all over the place. I had never seen one of these before, and the first time I saw them, I'm like, this is going to kill some red-eye bass, and it did. And now I order them from a place like Tackle Warehouse or something like that. But a yum 3 dinger on a size 1 hook and a 32 ounce weight will catch you all the red-eye bass you would ever want. If you're really just trying to catch bigger size ones for whatever reason, this will size select for them, just because the little ones will try, but they can't get it in there. Other great worms that I've used, a chomper. This is I did not discover this. A friend of mine discovered this as a killer for shoal bass, especially over on the Chattahoochee where the water's really clear. Fishing this on a 1 ounce hook, and again that 32 ounce weight. Man, I personally watched that be unbeatable. Kind of like a Ned rig size yum. I found these in the discount bins at Walmart. I'm the guy digging through the discount bins looking for weird worms that other people might not throw. And then this is just a typical yum dinger 4. This is more of a shoal bass thing. This would actually be what I would consider finesse for shoal bass. we'll do a shoal bass video at some point and talk about lure selection there. But these chompers, man, they have a really strong smell to them. They're very, very thin. They're very, very subtle, and they work like nobody's business. They can be a little long for red eyes. If I was fishing these, I would probably want to cut them down to about the 3-inch range before I use them, just because you're talking about fish that are, you know, the wheelhouse of what you're catching for red eye bass is pretty much 6 to maybe 9 inches. So the bigger the worm, the harder it is for the fish to get the hook, and then when they get it, ball the worm up on the hook and not get the hook in the fish. So that's a quick overview of the lure selection that I use. Again, I could take 90% of these lures out of that box and come up here with a couple little spinner baits, a couple little crankbaits, and the plastic worms, and that's all you really need to catch red eye bass in any place I've ever been. I did want to mention real quick, so what kind of rod and reel? Well, the rod is actually a custom built rod by a friend of mine up in northeast Georgia. He does unbelievably fabulous jobs. This is the second one of these he's made for me. The other one's a much bigger rod, and they're both done in shoal bass colors because of me, and I just appreciate him so much. Reels, I use nothing pretty much but a Fluger President. I started using these on a much bigger size, and I'm telling you, these things are indestructible. I have several of the biggest ones they have, and I've had them out to Baja, and they fished in the Sea of Cortez 2 or 3 times. I've had them up in Quetico, where they've spent a week on an island, hardly getting maintenance and all that kind of stuff, been rained on. These things do not die. I've had several of these reels that I've had for 12 to 15 years, and they're still smooth as they were the day I started using them. You know, I'm not a brand guy usually, but I will say this: these things are every bit as tough as anything else I've seen, and they're half the price of almost every other reel. This particular reel's not the smallest one. I have the smallest one. It's on another rod. This is the second smallest one. This currently is spooled up with 8-pound fluorocarbon, and at the end of it you have a 12 or 15-pound fluorocarbon leader, about a foot long. I bet a lot of you use that, but in case some of you don't, and you're wondering why in the world would you use a leader here for these small fish, it's because I'm lazy. It's because I know that I will keep forgetting to retie, and 8-pound test, if you keep not retying, sooner or later you're going to break it off either on a fish, or more likely up in red eye fishing you'll break it off on a tree or a rock or something. And so this allows me to be lazy, because it's almost impossible to wear through 12 or 15 pound fluorocarbon while you're red eye bass fishing. So that's my setup. I'm no expert by any stretch of the imagination, but it works. I rarely have had any trouble catching fish this way. I know a lot of you have probably already have your own way of doing things. Obviously fly angling is a big thing for red eye bass, but I like spin fishing, and this is a spin fishing setup that works for red eye bass. I hope you found it interesting and informative, and until next time,